There are now two thous that break my narcissistic shell. I have a divine thou that is sending me on the mission. It's not just the cosmos beckons me to an adventure. That's impersonal. Here, no, there's a creator. And he wants the benefit of all mankind. And he chose me. And he gives me on a mission. So I have this rapport, this dialogue with God. And there's another thou, the human thou. I'm here for others.
This video was made possible through the kind support of my sponsors over at Patreon. Patreon is a great way to help independent creators like myself produce original content. If you'd like to get more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much.
I'm going to start by saying a few words about who I am, where I'm coming from, which planet I'm from, and to get us into our topic. So I grew up. I'm 50 years old. I grew up in an ultra-secular Tel Aviv home. That's my origin story. My house, my mother actually grew up in a very religious home, but she left completely. She went to study art, went to America, to New York, met my father. My father grew up in a kibbutz, so he was already into the erasing the Jewish hard drive. And they were, in many ways, at the edge of the secular, left-wing, bohemian, liberal Tel Aviv front, and that's where I grew up. And no connection to my Judaism, no connection to spirituality or religion at all. I'm fond of telling a little story that when I was about coming into my second grade. My parents built this fancy new home, and we moved in, and they gave a tour. Everyone who came, they gave a tour, and the tour always began with the same sentence. It began, as you can see, there's no mezuzah in our home. And I never heard of a mezuzah before, but I realized there's something very, very important. You have to make sure you don't have it on your door. And it was internalized at an early age. And mezuzah is supposed to guard your home, so this is an aura of protection. So, and it's a modern mezuzah, a high-tech mezuzah. So I grew up, went to art high school. After the army, I went to England and then New York to study art. Thank you. And still very far away. It was only when I left Israel, I was basically, from a very young age, directing myself to being what I was raised to be: cosmopolitan, universal, a man of the world, citizen of the world. I didn't want anything to do with my own Jewish identity or Israeli identity even. I only read English, I only listened to English music, songs. And then when I came to England, I suddenly was face to face with a whole bunch of people from all over the world. I was intoxicated with this post-national utopia that it was the mid-90s. The whole world seemed to be moving into a world with no wars and no borders. The European Union was shaping up. You could travel through Europe without any passport. And the Oslo Accords were in full power. And then two things happened. One was that I started asking people about their own cultures. Because I said we have this amazing getting together with people from all over the world. I asked them about their own cultures, and they couldn't tell me anything about wherever they came from. There was people from the Far East, from Finland, from Africa, from Bermuda, from all over the world. They couldn't tell me anything, and at some point I got angry. I said, "You're a bunch of just liberal, spoiled kids who know nothing about their own heritage, and what kind of cosmopolitan world we're building if no one can..." Until finally someone asked me, this Indian girl asked me, said, "What can you tell me about Judaism? Because all I know about Judaism is I saw a picture once of a boat with animals coming into the boat. And that's all I know. That's all I know. Can you tell me anything else about Judaism?" And then it started hitting me that I was in the same situation. And the second thing that happened was that Rabin was assassinated. And all my friends were in the became to be the Rabin Square in Tel Aviv with the candles, and I realized that I belong more than I am willing to admit maybe. And after 1 year abroad, just 1 year, I came back. I came to Jerusalem, and I started, I was still only into Western philosophy, Western history, but at least I came back. And then in Jerusalem, you suddenly come across Judaism. You can't ignore it. It's, you go through Geula on your bus from the secular Rechavia to the secular Mount Scopus. You go through Geula. You can't escape it. It's there all the time. There's a lot of people with kippah in the studying next to you, and then you realize all the people without the kippah just had the kippah a little time before that they took it off, and it's like the invasion of the body snatchers. It's like everyone is Jewish, everyone is into Judaism in some way or out of Judaism, but in conversation with the Jews they're out of. So, and then I met someone who challenged me in a very profound way, because he totally broke my stigma. My stigma was that you can't be widely read and educated and have broad education and to be very religious. I met people who were very educated, but they were a little bit not so religious. They didn't speak so much. So they had their kippah, they had their siddur, but it was like totally compartmentalized. You know, they would study philosophy, psychology with me, and then they would go daven, then they would come back. And I would knew people who were very religious, but there was nothing in common. They didn't know history, they didn't know psychology, they didn't know philosophy. And then there came this guy, and only then I realized that there were many precedents, that Lubavitcher Rebbe was a person like this, that Rav Adin Steinsaltz was a person like this, who had really both worlds. And that was a big, big challenge for me. It was something that didn't fit into my mold, and that basically broke my shell and got me on a journey that I'm still on. And in a way, the first question I had to God, so there was a spiritual awakening even before the Jewish awakening, and then the spiritual awakening led to the Jewish awakening. And the first question I had was that, okay, so there is a God, and I am Jewish, and there is something to Judaism, and there's this amazing Torah that I had no clue existed. I thought it was totally irrelevant to our day and age, and I realized that was wrong. And so why did this God who gave this Torah and created the Jewish people, why did he make me ultra-secular for 26 years? And the only answer I could come up with was that it wasn't an accident, it was meant to be, and the whole purpose of me and for many, many other people in our generation who had a similar biography, and everyone has their own journey, we're going to talk about the journey today, was that I need to bridge the world. I need to contribute my part to bridging the world. I need to find ways of translating the Torah to the modern universal language that I was raised on, and I need to take elements from the whole wide world that I loved so much and bring it into the Torah. And I was fortunate enough to hear a very important line at the very beginning, which was that the point of being Jewish is that you need to be more than human, not less than human. Meaning everything that exists in mankind, you don't throw it away. And you don't need to subtract anything, you just add. You don't need to let anything go. Everything that you have that's good, you don't need to let it go. And another important line that I heard was that, you come from a world that's very sophisticated, very advanced, but it doesn't have the spiritual language so much, and it doesn't have the Jewish spiritual language, and it's not integrated. And then you meet people who live this integrated, this Jewish world and the Torah wisdom, but so much else is missing. A lot of sensibilities that I come from that they don't have. Aesthetic, literary, sometimes sensitivities to all kinds of various human lifestyles, all kinds of things. And I told this friend of mine who introduced me to this whole world, I told him, I love, seeing a Jewish family or seeing a, Jewish community, but there's so much is missing. There's so much missing. And then he told me, whatever's missing, that means you need to bring it in. That's what you need to do. And this is called b'makom she'en anashim yishtadel liot ish. If you feel that there's no one around that's aware of a certain problem, and you're aware of it, that means that it's your mission, your purpose to do something about it, to contribute your part to doing something. Now, en route to all this journey, a person who played an important part, an important role, as a kind of mediator, as a middle stage, was a non-Jew called Carl Jung. As I was going through this kind of existential crisis of my scientific, materialistic, mechanistic worldview basically collapsing, and realizing there is truth to spiritual traditions and religions, I felt very lost, very confused. I felt I was post-secular, that's how I called it. And then someone told me, you need to read Jung. That's what Jung is all about. And I started reading Jung, and that was a revelation, because Jung and many of his students and some thinkers that are adjacent, you can say, like William James, and all of these people showed to me that there is a language for a kind of post-secular spirituality, and something that acknowledges the coming together of different cultures, that is a result of the modern world, the global village, and that it's possible to give language, give words to this whole spiritual dimension or space that is opening up before you. And at some point it wasn't enough, and I found myself gravitating, also because I realized that you can't just mix and match religions and traditions without being somewhat of an expert in one of them, and not just an expert, but you have to commit to some particular path. At some point it made sense, and that's when it all merged with this guy that I met and this Jewish identity that was awakening. And then one of the things that has been consuming me ever since is I'm trying to deal with many different topics. There's a book that I just brand new, just came out of the printer like a week ago. It's the second place that I'm putting it on display, called Worlds of Wonder. It's a collection of essays, and if you go through the contents, you'll see that it's a wide range of topics, because we live in a very big wide world, and there's so many things to address, and I'm trying to take all the pieces together. But one central theme is how do I take the world of imagery and symbols and themes, cultural themes, mythological themes. If you grow up on Hollywood, on Star Wars, on The Lord of the Rings, it's a kind of modern mythology. It very consciously borrows from ancient mythologies. It's definitely part of your world. It's part of my childhood. And it was also created by the same God who gave the Torah. How do I merge somehow, synthesize somehow these two worlds? So that has been walking with me, going with me ever since the beginning. And what I want to do tonight is a kind of exercise or a demonstration of how you can take Torah, deep Torah ideas, that especially that come from the Golan referred to the inner dimension of the Torah, that is Kabbalah and Chassidut, which in a way is like the motherboard or the DNA. It's the most high, it's the most farther away from many Jews who don't know, but from Jews, religious Jews. They study Talmud, they study the Midrashim, and they're kind of taken aback by Kabbalah and Chassidut. And yet, as profound and esoteric as it may be, it holds the ultimate level of where the concepts are distilled, of what Judaism is all about, what the biblical stories are even all about. So if you get to the motherboard, you find the interface. And when you get to the interface, you can start plugging in other hardware and other software from other worlds and see what happens. So we're going to try and do this to Jung. And in particular, the topic called the hero's journey. So just a little bit, by way of a little bit of introduction, to go into the figure of Jung. So Jung was, of course, a student of Freud. Freud was Jewish, Jung was not Jewish. But this is a good example of something that we all know, and I'm sure some of you at least would have similar experiences. We have a Jew, a very brilliant, genius Jew, who was very far away, not only from Judaism, but from any kind of belief or real appreciation of spirituality, of anything metaphysical. For him, a spiritual, mystical experience is you want to go back to the womb, You only have basically an animal soul. You're driven by animal drives, and everything else, you're basically deluding yourself, and you're convincing yourself that you have something else. And he is as materialistic as you can be. Just it's almost sometimes really difficult to read, almost. Just how cynical and how much of a reductionist he can be. And then he has a student. The student is not Jewish, but the student is highly sensitive to spirituality. And you have the Jew speaking that God doesn't exist, and the student saying, but of course God exists. And until they have the big breakup, the famous breakup, with Jung individuating, as he would say, and going on his own path. And this is something that has happened actually several times in history. And I think it happens, I remember I was, determined to be as far away from Judaism as possible, as far away from Israel, the land of Israel, as possible. And then you go to other countries and you meet people who say, oh, you're from the Holy Land. And my dream is to be in the Holy Land. Oh, wow, you inherited the Torah. And so this dynamic, in a way, was there between Freud and Jung. And it's a bit sad. It tells you something very deep. It tells you that when a Jew distances himself from Judaism, they would go all the way. Jews go all the way. They're in all the isms. They're at the forefront of all the isms. If it's communism or Buddhism, you always find at the top a lot of Jews. But then you have this very interesting figure of Jung, who, in a way, was trying to communicate to Freud that he's negating something about his own heritage that he should negate. And he did the same for me. And he did the same for many people. He brought them to spirituality. He brought them on a journey in which they discovered their roots. And he also did it for Jews. There are accusations that he was anti-Semite. One of the accusations actually coming from the son of his leading student. So he had a Jewish rabbi, not rabbi, he had a Jewish teacher, not rabbi, Freud, and he had the main person continuing his path was also Jewish. His name was Erich Neumann. Ran away from the Holocaust, lived in Tel Aviv, buried in Tel Aviv, wrote massive books about the mother archetype and the history of consciousness in German, in Tel Aviv. The son of Neumann is one of the people who accused Jung of being an anti-Semite, of being silent when Hitler rose to power. But it then turned out that it was far more interesting and complicated than that. He was hired by the CIA to profile Hitler. And he had a very good reason to be silent. He was working secretly for the Americans. He gave them a profile of Hitler. He told them Hitler has lost his individual identity. He can no longer be. He believes himself to be the embodiment of the German people. And he met Hitler, and this was. So that's a very interesting thing to know. So he wasn't anti-Semite at all. And just a short story that I just now, my hostess, who's sitting here, told me about this story. I quickly, went through some PDFs and found it. Beautiful story, just to get warmed up and going into our main topic, is that one day he had a dream. The dream was that a young woman, patient, comes to him. And she talks to him about her problems. And in the dream, he's listening and saying, I have no idea. I have no idea what to tell her. I have no idea what she's all about. He's like a therapist. He's sitting there saying, I don't know what's going on. But somehow, the only thing he sort of has the instinct that she has a father complex. But he doesn't know what to say. The dream ends. The next day, this woman patient comes in, Jewish patient. Very modern, Haskalah Jew, very secular, very cynical, very intelligent. She left her previous psychologist because he fell in love with her. And he told her, it's going to ruin my marriage, you have to find someone else. And she had neurosis, she had problems, he was very, and she had to find someone else. She came to Jung. And then Jung is realizing, this is the woman I dreamt of yesterday. It's her. And then he asked her about her father. And she said, no, my father, great, I love my father. He's also, like me, he's a very secular, very modern, progressive, enlightened Jew. But he had this instinct that he would follow his instincts. There was a father complex, so he asked her, what about your grandfather? And then she was taken aback, and her gaze sort of fell down, and he immediately said, oh, I got it. And she said, oh, he was He belonged to some Jewish sect. And he was totally like primitive, and I don't really connect with him. And he told her, would that sect be the Hasidim? And she said, yes. And he told her, by any chance, is he a tzaddik? He said, yes, he's a big rabbi. And some people say he has second sight, but it's all nonsense. And then he told her the following. He told her, what I'm about to tell you you may not like it, you may not accept it, but I feel that your father betrayed the path of his father. He turned his back on the secret. By the secret, he means the whole realm of the spiritual. And the fear of God is creeping back into you. The fear of God of your grandfather. And it was like a lightning bolt for her. And she was totally shaken. That's not what she expected to hear from a psychologist. That he basically told her, you need to go back to the path of your grandfather. And it's not up to you even. He saw that she has like a mystical potential, a spiritual potential. And she left. And then before the next meeting, he had another dream. Or maybe the next day he had another dream. That there was some event, some reception, she was there, and she comes up to him, and she tells him, can you help me? It's pouring rain. It's raining like crazy. Can you help me? Do you have an umbrella? And he fumbles with the umbrella, and then he finds himself on his knees, offering the umbrella to her as if she were a goddess. And the next day she comes, and all the issues have passed. The neurotic issues, the problems she was suffering, they're not detailed. Amazing story, unbelievable story. And he said, I saw that she had the soul of a saint, but she didn't have the language. He calls it the mythological language. Maybe a Jew would call it the religious or the Torah language. But he used the term mythological. She didn't have the language. So all she knew was just the intellect and fashion. She was very fashionable, and also being very sort of sexy or tempting, and she would use that. That's all she knew, because she grew up in a materialistic worldview. So that's what she would use, but there was another level that she didn't acknowledge. And he helped her reconnect to that level. Who knows where the grandfather was in the story, what role Jung played. Amazing story. So this is just to get us warmed up. Now, of course, the three main concepts that are identified with Jung. The first is the collective unconscious, that he believed that we don't have just a personal, private, cellar of secrets, dark secrets or low secrets like Freud believed. We have something far wider, far bigger. Later it was given the name superconscious. Just that there's a subconscious, there's a superconscious. He spoke about the collective unconscious. Another term is, of course, the archetypes. Archetypes are universal themes or tropes or figures that appear in all mythologies and all cultures because there's something that's foundational to the human existence. And so they would be dressed up in different costumes. And the third is individuation. Individuation meaning that each individual is going through a mythological journey, which later became to be known as the hero's journey. So the hero's journey, he talked a lot about, but in dispersed places. There was not one book that he talked about the idea of the hero. But he spoke about the fact that each one is the protagonist of their own life story. And each one has to go through a hero's journey of individuation because they grew up in a certain environment and their environment is dictating something about them, but they have to discover their own take. It doesn't have to be a rebellion, just like with the story. Sometimes it could be a conservative return, but it doesn't matter. It's your own journey that you're paving the way. And in many ways, all of the heroic stories of the mythologies, that's what they're all about. This theme or this idea was taken up by a famous American student of his, whose name is Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell did dedicate a whole book to this. Joseph Campbell was, I think, far less profound than Jung, but far more accessible. He was far more poetic in the way he wrote, and he could enchant people. He was really an enchanter. You can't. It's like he's like a magnet, and he was even accused that he didn't really know so many languages. He took mythologies from all. We'll talk about this later on. He took from all different things, and it was a bit of a salad what's going on there. But we'll talk about that. That's part of the things we want to address. But he wrote a very influential book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And The Hero with 1,000 Faces is all about the hero's journey, which according to him has 17 stages. It's a bit hefty. And then later on there were other more simplified versions that boil it down to 12 or 9 stages in order to make it more simplified and more accessible. This had an immense influence on psychologists, but also on pop culture. And the most famous example is George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, who sat in lectures of Joseph Campbell and basically said, I want to create a modern mythology that is appropriate for the 20th century. So it can't be something like The Lord of the Rings. It has to be in space with spaceships. And he came up with Star Wars, which was molded or based on the mold of the hero's journey. Later on, he organized a whole set of interviews of Joseph Campbell, an interviewer. You can find it online, I'm sure. It's called The Masks of God. And it was in his house, in his ranch in California. And so, and that became like I think every screenwriter in Hollywood knows the idea of the hero's journey. There were whole books written just about how to write your screenplay based on the idea of the hero's journey. Now, before we go into the details of the journey and what I want to do, looking at it from a Jewish Torah, Kabbalah and Chassidut perspective, just a little bit of a critique of the Jungian approach to this whole comparative mythology, a notion basically. The idea of the archetype is based on abstraction. You basically come to a mythology and you say, okay, it has a lot of details, but that's just the dressings, or that's just the external appearance. I don't really care about them. I want to undress the mythology. I want to abstract and find the universal skeleton that all mythologies have in common. Right then and there, you have a problem. You have a problem because you are ignoring. You're in a way you shoot the arrow and then you mark, because if you're going to find something that isn't common to other mythologies, you're going to ignore it. You're going to say, oh, that's an incidental element because it's only in this incident. And you come in with the approach of where they overlap. That's where it's interesting, because that's where it's something universal, something that tells us something about the human condition and so on. But what if there's something very precious hiding in a particular tradition or a particular mythology or a particular religion? You're going to miss out on it. And the other thing is that you're basically saying, it's basically a kind of philosophical worldview that is saying the truth is in the abstract realm. You need to abstract the central archetype or theme or conflict, and then you get to the heart of the matter. And the outside details, they don't matter so much. Now, of course, any tradition that cherishes the own particulars of its tradition would take issue with this, right? It was saying, hey, wait, you're taking away what we don't see as so incidental or not non-essential to what we're about. And so any tradition that cherishes its details or its particular characteristics would take issue with this. But I think Judaism would do it a bit more than others. And the reason I think Judaism takes even a greater issue or challenges this to a greater extent is that because Judaism is not just about abstraction. There is an element, a strong element of abstraction. The whole idea of monotheism, of breaking the idols, is about saying there is the one true God. It doesn't have a face, doesn't have an image. You can make a statue of it, you can make a picture of it. That's a motion of abstraction. The whole movement, the whole element of abstraction reached its pinnacle in Maimonides. Maimonides basically said, even all the metaphors in the Bible of God being angry, God forgiving, you need to, as much as you can, see them as metaphors or mishalim, all the anthropomorphic elements, he downplayed it as much as you possibly can and still be Jewish. And he took to the extreme the element of abstraction. Of course, he didn't abstract all the way to saying, like I was taught in the university when I was introduced to Maimonides, that he didn't really care about the commandments and the halacha. He just wrote the Mishneh Torah. That's his big, he has two big books, Maimonides. He has the Guide to the Perplexed, and he has the Mishneh Torah. If you go to yeshiva, you only learn about the Mishneh Torah. There's also the Guide to the Perplexed. You go to the academia, there's only the Guide to the Perplexed. Oh, he also wrote something else. And then they would go and tell you, oh, there's two Maimonides. There's not one. You know? There's the halachic Maimonides, the philosophy Maimonides. And so they split him in half. But no, he was one being. He cared very much about the details of the Torah, but philosophically he tried he minimized it. That enabled some people to say that there were two Maimonides. But there is a totally other element, which, like I said, existed in Maimonides, and of course exists in even stronger ways in other thinkers, and in particular in Kabbalah, which is the opposite of abstraction, which is something like manifestation or concretization or embodiment, which means that you go from the abstract to the details. And not only that, and in Hebrew, by the way, it's called, abstraction is called hafshata. That's like undressing. That's literally what it means. You undress a thing from its particular details, and you get to the essence of it. It's hafshata, and that's a very widely used word. And the other word is halbasha. It's dressing up again. So Judaism has this hafshata element, but also has an halbasha, and then we're told something even more interesting, that we all know this expression, every descent is for the sake of a greater ascent. Things go down in order to go back to a higher place than where they came from. And the metaphor for this is unbelievable. The metaphor is that God is like, so to speak, holding like a flashlight. A flashlight goes down here, and then this world is like a mirror, and then there's a returning light, but the returning light goes up, but it doesn't stop at the flashlight. It goes higher to God holding the flashlight. It tells us something about the source of the light, not just the light itself. The light tells us about the light. But the returning light illuminates, so to speak, the face or the essence of the giver of the light. So the idea is that every descent for the sake of an ascent, when you go back to the halbasha, to the details and the particulars, and to the embodiment of Judaism, the actually committing to actions. There's mitzvot, there's commandments, there's traditions, and also studying Torah is all about the details. Studying Torah is not at all like studying philosophy. There is an element, a philosophical element, if you want to get to the gist, right? The gist is like the geist, the ghost, the spirit. So you get to the gist, that's the abstraction, but then you go into all the details. And Judaism is far more concerned about this than most traditions, if not all. And the best example, you think about, for example, Aesop's fables, the Greek writer of fables. He has like a fox and a stork. He himself doesn't really care if it's a fox or a stork. It doesn't matter for him if you change the animal. It's just an example. There is a moral. The moral is the gist, is the geist, is the ghost, is the spirit he wants to get across. There's an archetypal lesson to be learned, and then you can shed the details. Judaism doesn't work this way. There would be a biblical story, but you don't read the story, okay, so let's get to the gist of Joseph and his brothers and what's happened there. So it's about brotherly sibling rivalry, and then you resolve. So that's like, that's like the first lesson. And then, so what is the name Yosef tells us, and what is Kutonet Pasim, and what is the bowl? Why does it say that the bowl was both empty and didn't have water? We know that it doesn't have water because we're told it's empty. So why did they say not water? So we learned from this that there were also snakes there. And every detail counts. And that's how Chazal, which have made Judaism what it is, they were the recipients of the Torah. They were the ones meant to interpret it. And they put so much effort into the details. So in a way, Judaism is standing before Jung and challenging him and saying, you are going not even halfway. it's like for us, that's just the beginning. It's amazing. It really is an amazing discovery to see that some biblical stories have sort of spiritual siblings in other traditions. That you have that was what shook everyone. In the 19th century, they discovered the story of Gilgamesh, and then they realized there's a flood story in the Sumerian epic, and then they realized it also everywhere in the world, because the Indians have it, the American Indians, the Indian Indians have it, everyone has it. The story of the flood and the ark. So that's an amazing discovery, that you have recurring universal motifs. And for a lot of people, that caused them to even sort of lose their connection to Judaism, because they said, so there's nothing special here. But after you get over this intoxication, and you start looking at the details, for example, you look at the flood, in the Gilgamesh epic, the flood was the gods fighting, and the byproduct of that was the flood. That's a very different story than God being angry at humanity's moral state and deciding to punish it and start anew. It's a totally different story. The resemblance is very superficial. So there's a moment in which you notice the resemblance. For the first time, it was shocking to many people. And that made them lose their religion, lose the faith that there's something unique about the Torah. But then once you let that sink in, and you go into the details, then something totally different emerges. And so Judaism is standing now before all these Jungian concepts and is saying, wait a minute. And I would even say more than that. Because the Jewish tradition cherishes and gives such weight to the details and the particulars of the story, even more than to the general or gist that could be universal, in a way it's saying that you can connect to God in a deeper way than you can with just the abstract. It's almost like, so I mentioned before that there was this series of conversations between Joseph Campbell and this interviewer that was held by George Lucas, and it became a TV series and a book. It was called The Masks of God, which basically the idea is that there's one God, and he has many masks, and all the traditions, all the religions, all the mythologies are the masks. And so now I'm going to take you to a personal mythology of mine and many other people in my generation, and other was the movie E.T. If you remember the movie E.T., there was one moment that, as a child, was very powerful for me, and then it connected with this whole convergence of Jung and Judaism. There's a moment in which the kids are hiding. E.T. is like basically this kind of angel. And that's another history. It's a fallen angel, right? That became an alien. And anyway, they're hiding the angels because the adults can't see the angel. They don't understand the angel. They're not going to appreciate him. And they actually ignore him. And then the kids are trying to hide the alien in their home. And then they put it, and then at some point, the mother is angry, she's storming, she's running up to the room, and everyone, we're in tension because she's going to discover the alien, and everything will come in vain, and would have been in vain. And then she comes into the room and she opens the closet, and she's not taken aback, and then we see what she sees. She sees a lot of dolls and puppets and toys of animals and superheroes, whatever, all kinds of things. And in the middle of all these faces, all these, he's just putting his head and not blinking and sitting like this. And she doesn't remember what toys her kids have. So she assumes it's just one of the toys, and she closes the cupboard, and we can sigh a sigh of relief. And so what's happening here? She sees a lot of masks, but she doesn't realize that one of the masks is a face. And she totally misses out on it because she doesn't care about the particulars. She doesn't care about the toys. The kids care. They know immediately that's a toy and that's my alien friend. And but the mother doesn't care because she's a Jungian. It's all the masks of God. But the kids, there's something Jewish about the kids. There was a Jewish director, and he came up with the idea, Steven Spielberg, that in a way, what Judaism is saying is that, yes, there are many traditions, there are many religions, and it's all God's light coming into the world, and it's coming through all these masks. Even the idea of the masks of God exists in Kabbalah. It's called the 70 nations. They have 70 sarim. It's like ministers or guardian angels. And the divine light of each nation is passing through the prism of that particular nation. That's why it has the particular shade and color and style and so on. But in the Torah, the gift that the Jews received is that it doesn't go through this mediator. And so God is trying to reveal his face, by the way, not just to the Jews, but first to the Jews, to all of mankind, through the Torah. So the particular features of the Torah, it's like the facial features of God, so to speak. We can't draw a portrait of God, but the Torah, the details of the Torah. So again, if you're coming from a Jungian perspective and you're saying the Torah is just another mask, everyone is just a mask, you miss out on this. But if you are if you're willing to open yourself up to this possibility, which may sound, nationally chauvinistic, it may sound this way, but it's a challenge to say maybe there's one tradition that it's a bit different, that the details do matter. And it's not just for one nation, because the story itself is that God creates all of mankind, tries to reveal himself to all of mankind twice, first with Adam and Eve, then with Noah and his wife. At some point gives up and say, okay, we'll go with one nation, and then at the end of days, it'll spread to everyone else. Maybe the time has come now. But the idea is that I want to give one nation a revelation in which the details are an essential part of the abstract essence. So that's a philosophical introduction to the convergence of Jung and Judaism, and Jung in particular Kabbalah, because Kabbalah is where the halbasha element, the going into the details, it's like the polar opposite of Maimonides, basically. Maimonides was all about abstracting God as much as possible. Kabbalah is all about going as much as possible into the details and finding the most profound secrets in the details. And someone once told me in a very nice way, you want to sum it up in like a slogan, Maimonides said God is neither this nor that nor that nor that. And Kabbalah says God is this and that and that and that. And in a way, and then this and this and this together, and then all the details come together. Now, the hero's journey. So when I came up with the idea for this class, this has been going with me for years, but I never put my mind to it seriously. And I thought this trip would be a good chance to do it. And now that I see you, it's even a better chance, because you're the right people, the perfect people for this exercise. That is also an exercise for me, because it's something that was totally new, that I'm only on the beginning of the journey of exploring this. But I always felt intuitively that I love the hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell model that I'll describe in a minute. I love it in a way, I'm living it, and you'll see it in a minute. But I had this intuition that if I would try to compare it with the particular stages to the biblical heroes of Judaism, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't stick. And where it wouldn't, and the places that it won't stick, the treasure will be there. The treasure will be where the hero's journey fails to capture the heroes that we have in the Bible. Maybe afterwards you can go beyond the Bible. There are other heroes in the history of Judaism. But the Bible does, of course, the first level, the most potent and eternal level. And then I was sort of debating which way to go. And at first I thought it would be interesting to go with the one biblical figure that's most known by the term Gibor, hero. Who's he? Shimshon HaGibor. And why is that appropriate now? Because he has a lot of issues with Gaza. But that really doesn't fall into the mold. And in fact, with most people, I tried to think about Moses, I think about Abraham. Most of them, they don't fit. I finally found one, because you need someone that partially fits, and then you can look at the differences. And it turns out there is one that really fits beautifully with the hero's journey, but then you can see the differences, and that is Yaakov, Jacob. So he will be our main protagonist. He's going to be our main example. But even before that, just the fact that he was difficult to find, one, and there was not the first person I thought about. Abraham, the first, sojourner, who goes into the unknown. And then I thought about Moses, and I thought about David. And it took a while to get to Jacob. He wasn't the first to come to mind. But he was the one that fit, that you can show that he appears to fit into the mold, but then you see that it doesn't really fit. And But just that shows you that there's something misleading about this whole idea. Campbell used a very presumptuous term. He called it the monomyth. He said there's only one myth, basically. There's the monomyth. It's the hero's journey that I traced, I found, I extracted the hero's journey, and I found it in here. And that's the monomyth. That's not true. It is just not true. And if you look at his book, it's such a salad. He's taking from all over, and he's just taking whatever fits the mold. Now, he was onto something, definitely, but calling it the monomyth, saying there's only one hero's journey, with slight variations, just by going to the Bible, it totally breaks. It just totally breaks. But it does fit Yaakov. So that's where we're going to go. But even that will just take 2 steps in order to get to Yaakov. We're going to talk about a little bit Abraham and Isaac, his grandfather and his father. The 3 avot, the 3 patriarchs, in Kabbalah, they form a very, very basic model, which is basically the model that was later reiterated by German philosopher, not Kant. No. Hegel, thank you. Who said Hegel? Hegel HaZahav. Hegel used the famous term of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And that is basically the most basic Kabbalistic model. And it says that you go to one side, and then you go to the other side, and then you combine them. And the shape you get is the shape of the punctuation mark called the segol, right? One of the punctuation marks that we use it's like the equivalent of the letter E or the E, the German E at least, the E movement. And it means you go to the right and you go to the left, and then you find the balance, and the balance goes further down somehow into embodiment, if we're talking about embodiment and going down. And even one of the explanations of why the Jewish people is called an Am Segula is like God's treasure or God's secret chosen people. The chosen people doesn't say chosen. It says Am Segula is that we have the secret of the Segol, of the thesis, antithesis, synthesis, that later Hegel used those terms for. So the idea is that Abraham is the right hand Sephirah. He's all about what we call chesed, or loving kindness. And then his son Isaac is the very opposite, totally different figure. He's into Gevurah, apropos being a Gibor. And that's totally opposite. And then the grandchild is a synthesis of the grandfather and the father. So we see this beautifully if we try to apply the hero's journey. How do we see this? So what's the hero's journey? So the hero's journey it goes like this. It's a circle, which is really a spiral. Because the idea is that you go back to the beginning, but you're more elevated than you came before. And the circle goes like this. You start at what is called the known world. You descend or you cross into the unknown world, the special world. That's your hero's journey. You go through all kinds of stages, and then you go back to the world that you came from, but this time you have a treasure or a secret or something that you learned, and then you're elevated, and he calls it a master of 2 worlds now. So the basic stages, it's 17. We're not going to go to all of them, but the basic stages are that first, he calls it, you have the call to adventure. Something calls you to leave your known world. Then you find a mentor or teacher or guide. Right? You see this in Star Wars, that a robot comes to him, that's the call to adventure. Then he meets the old wise man, so on. Then you cross the threshold to the unknown world, and you go through a series of trials, and then you have a crisis. The crisis involves, the screenwriters ignore this for some reason, but with Campbell it's very vital that in the crisis there's also an element of marriage, of coming with the feminine or with the other gender, and there's an element of a crisis there, and crisis and marriage somehow together in the same element. And then you get something like an apotheosis. You become a little bit divine. You reach a certain level. There's an atonement with the Father. And then finally, you cross the threshold again on your way back to the world, to the known world, to the familiar world. And then you come back, but you're, like I said, a master of two worlds. It's a circle. So there's a known world, you're initiated, you cross the first threshold, you go through all these trials and tribulations and adventures, you become a hero, you cross the other threshold, you go back, but you're more than you were, and then you've individuated, you become the hero of your life. It doesn't work with Abraham, it doesn't work with Isaac, it does work with Jacob. And it doesn't work with the first two for opposite reasons. Abraham goes out of the familiar realm, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetcha u'mibet avicha, go unto you from your land and from your birthplace and from the house of your father into an unknown land, Hela aretz asher ar'eka, a land that I will show you, don't know what it is. And you have a mission, it's a totally new mission, nobody's had this mission like you're having it. He never comes back. He never comes back. It's not about coming back. He's on a trajectory to start this nation, to bring monotheism to the world that forgot monotheism, and he doesn't go back. In a way, he wants to bring the monotheism to all the world, but he doesn't go back to the familiar world. That's not what he does. He goes and he dies, and Eretz Israel is buried in Marat HaMachpelah in Hebron. Yitzchak, his son, never leaves. And he's the one associated with Gvura. He's more of a Gibor even, in the sense that the Kabbalistic Sephirah that goes with him is Gvura. He never leaves the land of Israel. He's born and dies in the land of Israel. He has one country, he has one wife. It goes together. And he's very loyal. His Gvura is being a conservative. The only thing, we don't have so many stories about Isaac. He's the most mysterious of the Avot. The main thing we're told is that he redigs the wells that his father dug before. So the father was a revolutionary. He broke the idols of his idolatrous father and broke through to another realm. The son is a conservative. He wants to keep the path of the father, and his gvura is not changing anything.
So why is
and sticking to the path.
Why his name is laughter?
Why his name is laughter? He was born because his old birth was miraculous. He was laughing at the laughter of fate. But a deeper understanding is that if you have a lot of borders, and if you're focused, then there's a precious element of joy and laughter that you can preserve. If you're too open, too extroverted, you lose your inner laughter. And if you're an introvert, that's also Jungian terms that are very good for these two figures. Abraham is an extrovert. Isaac is an introvert. And they don't fit the hero's mold. The first because he goes out into the unknown, never comes back. And the second because he never leaves the known. Because the known is very holy and good. And his whole thing is being focused. And he's focused on his wife. He doesn't take a maidservant when they can't have a baby. His father does it, his son does it. He doesn't do it. He just prays until they have a baby. He just doesn't stop praying until they get the twin babies. Yaakov, who's the synthesis, is from all the biblical figures I looked at, the one that closest fits the Jung-Campbell hero's journey mold. Until you go into the details, and then it breaks apart in some particular places that are very interesting. So what is the story with Yaakov? So first, let's be a Jungian. I'll be Joseph Campbell, and I'll show you that Yaakov is just another example of the hero's journey. He's just like all the others. He's a perfect proof that the hero's journey is totally universal and it exists everywhere. He is born he knows only the known world. He is described as Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. His Tam is whole or sincere or also naive. It can also be used as naive. He's innocent. He is in the tents. His brother isn't. But his brother is not the main character. He is sheltered, secluded, just like his father originally. His father never left the land of Israel. He was very shielded, very protected. He also had a brother who was bad. The brother was sent away. So his father, right, Yitzchak, Ishmael was sent away. Yitzchak grew up very sheltered. Yaakov they're trying to do the same with him, but it doesn't work. At some point, he has a mentor. He has a call to adventure. What's the call to adventure? The call to adventure is that his mother spoke to an angel or had a prophecy that the young son is going to inherit over the older son. It was from the very beginning. When she was pregnant, she had it. So the call to adventure for him was always there, and at some point maybe he heard about it. Then he has a mentor. The mentor is his mother in this case. It's a different mentor every time. His mother teaches him how to take the blessings that she knows he's supposed to inherit from his twin brother Esau. He dresses up like him. The father is blind. He gets the blessings. The blessings have real power. And he gets the energy that the elder son is supposed to get. Then he has to run away because the brother wants to kill him. So then he has a very, very clear threshold. He leaves. He comes to a place that traditionally that's the place of the future temple, the Har Moriah. And he has a dream. He sees a ladder. Sees angels going up, angels going down. He's on the threshold of the land of Israel, not yet called the land of Israel because he's not called Israel, but the land of Canaan where he was born, and the rest of the world. And he has a dream. And he builds an altar, and God promises him that he will look after him. And then he crosses into the unknown, just crossing into the terra incognita that's beyond the map that he knew. And then he has a lot of trials. He faces a kind of dragon. The dragon is his uncle, Laban or Lavan. And he's like...
Father-in-law.
Then he also becomes his father-in-law. Rachel and Leah are his cousins. Laban is the brother of Rivka, his mother. So it's his uncle who becomes his father-in-law. So he meets the uncle is a cheat, the uncle is evil, he's like the monster. So he's the challenge, he marries twice. He learns how to be cunning, how to be a little deceitful. Before his mother taught him, but now he has to learn himself, he has to deal with all these trials of this alien world that wants to cheat him and forces him to marrying Leah that he didn't want, and then he marries and cheats him into working for 7 years, then more 7 years, and all this, and then he gets a treasure. The treasure, a very Jewish treasure, is a big family. He has a lot of kids. He has 13 kids. And then he goes back. Then there's another threshold, very clear. He's alone in a place called Ma'avar Yabok, a passage, a narrow passage. And he's alone, and he fights an angel at night. That's the threshold back to the familiar. He's going back to his homeland. And he goes back to his homeland, and then in the threshold he receives another name, his heroic name, you can say, Israel. And then he's a master of two worlds. He has two names. He has two languages. He speaks. He also, when he bids farewell to his uncle turned father-in-law, they build a mound. And Jacob calls it by the Hebrew name Gal-Ed, and Laban calls it by the Aramaic name Yegar Sahaduta. And so it's like between Aramaic and Hebrew, and he has both languages. He's a master of two worlds. And he goes back to, and then he starts his family. He starts a Jewish nation, which is now called Bnei Israel. Right? The hero's journey. But then it starts breaking at the seams, and this is where it gets more interesting. And I realize it's also getting late and getting maybe a lot of content, but I'm going to try and focus on the basic details, because we got to the half point of what I was preparing. But I told you, it's a rough sketch, it's a new thing, and we had a lot of introductions. But I'll try to focus on the main thing. The main thing, well, two things. The first thing that breaks already with Abraham is that it's not an adventure. It's not an adventure. With Abraham, it's a mission. It's a very different thing. When the key word that you use is the call to adventure, another word Joseph Campbell liked using is find your bliss. That's what he used, find your bliss. So they're very, very, elevating words, uplifting words. They're very pleasant. I want to go on an adventure. I want to find my bliss. But they're also a bit narcissistic. It's all about you. When God is telling Abraham, Lech Lecha, although he uses the word Lecha, the whole idea is is that I want you to bless all the nations of the world, and I want you and your descendants to go in the way of God and to do what is right and just. שילכו בדרך השם לעשות צדקה ומשפט. You have a mission to bring monotheism and universal morality to a pagan world, an idolatry, a polytheistic world. Now, that's a totally different thing. Why? Because there are now two thous that break my narcissistic shell. I have a divine thou that is sending me on the mission. It's not just the cosmos beckons me to an adventure. That's impersonal. The cosmos beckons me, sends me something, a sign, and it calls me. I'm the only thing that matters in this universe. I'm the center. Here, no, there's a creator, and he wants the benefit of all mankind, and he chose me, and he gives me a mission. So I have this rapport, this dialogue with God, to the point that Abraham can argue with God. And there's another thou, the human thou. I'm here for others. If I would come to the story from the perspective of Campbell and the hero's myth, I would say, Abraham, he went on an adventure, he never came back, and Jacob did go on the typical adventure, but it wasn't an adventure. Because Abraham passes on to Isaac, who passes on to Jacob, and the whole idea of Jacob inheriting the blessings is because the question is, who is best to carry on the torch of monotheism to the world? And the mother knows very clearly that he's more fit to the role than Esau, the brother. It's not favoritism. There's a mission. The whole family has a mission. It's not an adventure. Now the thing is, that the beautiful thing, that's something very, very, impactful on our lives. If we build our lives around the Campbell's hero's journey, he is educating us to be a bit of narcissists. You're an adventure, your own adventure. Maybe someone else has their own adventure, but it's not your business. You have your own adventure. The whole idea of adventure and bliss, it's so foreign to the Jewish ear because we have a mission. It's a different thing. Now the thing is, because there's not just the human thou, that I want to show the idolatrous nations that there is one God and so on, because there's also the runner of the show, that means it's also an adventure. But it's not first and foremost an adventure. So there is an element of adventure as a side product. You're going to go to a foreign land, you don't know what's going to happen there, and you're going to go through adventures. But it's not yet like you're looking for an adventure. You're looking to do what you came into the world to do. That's a totally, totally different mindset. It's far more mature and elevating than to think about looking for your adventure and your bliss. And it'll be adventurous, don't worry. And not only that, you'll find yourself, lech lecha. You will reach also yourself. But the lecha is the second word. The first word is lech, not lecha. Lech, go to others. You have a mission, go on your mission. You will also get to lecha. And it's amazing that it's the same word because the Torah doesn't have punctuation marks. It could be read as go, or to you. But we know it's first to go and then to you. First to go away from yourself and then you reach yourself. You have to go away from yourself. They also talk about losing the ego, but it's all wrapped up in ego language because of the adventure and the bliss terminology. So that's the first thing you see. And even him, doing the whole thing with the brother and the stealing the blessings, all has to do with this mission. It's all for the sake of this mission. So that's one amazing thing that we can all just go home now because we've already gotten something amazing. But it's not, it goes deeper. Because we totally neglected the twin brother. The twin brother, according to Kabbalah, is so vital to the story that it's unbelievable. And if we were just looking at it, the whole Jacob story through the Jungian lens, we could ignore Esau because he disappears from the story at some point, and when he comes back, they just kiss and hug and that's it, because it's all forgiven. And then we bid farewell to him. But according to Kabbalah, he's far more part of the story than we would think. And here we have to understand the most important concept that we get from Jacob's story. So, introducing two Kabbalistic notions. The two very basic Kabbalistic notions are called tohu and tikkun. Tohu is loosely translated as chaos, but it's not really chaos. It's an abundance of questioning and wondering and searching. It's a very positive energy that gets lost in the world if you don't know how to contain it, and then it becomes chaotic. But it isn't chaotic in principle. And tikkun is when you are able to integrate that energy into what is called vessels. So the Kabbalistic definition is that tohu is a state of things in which there's a lot of lights, meaning energy, desire, will, vision, ideas, creativity. But your vessels, the means of expressing all this energy is very narrow and immature and easily breaks. And then it breaks and it becomes chaotic. That's why it's called chaos in English or in Greek. Tikkun is the opposite. Tikkun is a mature state that your vessels are very strong and wide and flexible. You're grounded, you're embodied, you know how to deal with the world. And you also are able to integrate other views. You're not narrow, you're not limited. But it goes along with not having all these amazing lights. And so often when you're a teenager, you're going through a chaotic stage because you're discovering so many things about the world. There's a lot of lights, but you're still a young kid, so you don't really know life. Your vessels are immature. That's why you go through a lot of mashberim, right? You break when you're an adolescent. In many ways, so before we connect to Esau is the tohu person. That's why he's like an eternal adolescent. And tikkun is when you're mature and you've grown up and you're stable, but the lights are not as powerful as when you were young. And you can think about, for example, the hippies in the 60s. They had all these amazing visions, world peace, and stop the war in Vietnam. But it was very immature. The whole language was just, let's just all love each other, and that's it. It's very, very simplistic. And then they grew up and they became, bourgeois. And they became adults, some of them at least, and then they lost the energy. They lost the dream of being like a flower child. But it exists also on a divine level or in a holy level, that there's all these divine lights, and you want to bring them into the world, but you need vessels. So there's the tohu is a lot of lights and narrow vessels, as tikkun is a good vessel, strong vessels, but little lights, small lights. But the ideal is called the lights of tohu in the vessels of tikkun. Tikkun is rectification, right? Rectified. The ideal is to integrate them. The ideal is that you go back to your childhood dreams and the energy and the excitement that you had, and you integrate it into your now mature vessels. Esau is a tohu soul. His spiritual root is higher than Yaakov. That's why his father Isaac loves him. If he were such a wicked, horrible man, he is a wicked, horrible man. But we're told that Rivka, the mother, Rebecca, loves Jacob, and Isaac loves Esau. Why does he love him? Because he sees the potential. He sees all these lights. And he wants him to mature and contain those lights. But he's immature, and that's why he's such a crude, swallowing up the stew, selling off his elder position, and then wanting to kill. And he's because his energy is unchanneled. But he has all this energy. Yaakov is a dweller of tents, and he has strong vessels. He's a man of tikkun. He's a good boy. Yeled Tov Yerushalayim. But his purpose is to integrate his twin brother's energy and lights and spiritual potential into himself. His real enemy is not the evil Lavan in Aram. His real enemy is not in the unknown world, it's in the known world. That you totally miss that with the hero's journey. The real enemy, the real conflict that he has, is with his twin brother that he leaves behind for 20 years and then has to face again. And the only reason he has to face his evil uncle turned father-in-law is to the external enemy in the unknown realm, which for Campbell, that's the main thing. It's the faraway enemy in the unknown world. You go to that world, you meet a monster, you conquer the monster, you go back, you bring back the princess or the treasure. And here, that's just to help him mature so that he faces the inner enemy in the known world, in the familiar world, in this world. Not in the mystical realm, not in the fantastical realm. That's his twin brother. His twin brother, it's like his other side, his other half, it's like what Jung would call the shadow self. He has to integrate the tohu, chaotic lights of Esau into his mature vessels and become a synthesis of him and Esau. And this is Israel. Because according to the sages, Chazal, when the second threshold that he comes back and he fights this mysterious nameless angel, Chazal tell us that this angel is the soul root of Esau. And for us, the oral tradition is just as much Torah as the written tradition. And the idea is that now when he finally fulfills his true goal, which is not to be in some unknown land and conquer some monster and get some treasure, well, he does all that. He beats Lavan, takes the wives, takes the children, goes. The main thing is that he goes back and uses his maturity to finally confront his twin brother that he was running away from 20 years before and integrate that into his psyche. And his name now, Israel, is really what it is, what it means. It's a synthesis of Yaakov and Esav together. And there's even this beautiful little gematria here. If you like gematria, some people don't like gematrias, but this is beautiful, you can't ignore it. If you do Israel minus Yaakov, what do you need to add to Yaakov to become Israel? Israel is 541. Yaakov is 182. So that minus that, it's 359. So it could be a lot of things, 359. But the most simple way is just to do 359, right? So 300 is Shin, and 50 is Nun, and 9 is Tet. And there's one word that comes out of it, this is Satan. Satan is your enemy. Satan is an enemy in the Bible. It's not like the Christian Satan. There's some of that also in Job, in Job. But it's just an enemy. His enemy, his devil, his opponent, his demon that haunts him, that chases him, is Esau. When he integrates this demon, this Satan, into himself, Yaakov plus Satan equals Israel. And then he confronts Esau, and they kiss and hug. And there's no problem, because he's already integrated. But he doesn't go with Esau. Esau says, now we're brothers, let's come with me. And he says, no, I shall go in the same direction at my own slow pace, he says, at nahalali iti. He's so integrated that he knows that he's not going to melt back into his brother. He has his own path. And he says, et nahalali iti. Second and last gematria of today is that nahalali iti also equals Israel. Equals Yaakov plus Satan. Et nahalali iti, I shall go at my own slow pace. Why? By the way, he adds something. He says, I shall go at my own slow pace because I have the cattle that I'm taking care of and I have the children that I'm taking care of. The main goal of the Jewish hero's journey is to build a home with a family and to slow your pace to meet the pace of your kids, future generations. So for Joseph Campbell, the main thing is leaving the known world, that's a boring world, and going to a fantastical land and becoming some hero there, and then you go back as you have to go back. And then you constantly, remember, you go back to your memories. I once was a hero, You become one of those annoying old people. I used to, one day, back in my day. But here it's the opposite. Here the main thing is to get back and to build a home and a family and start raising a family. That's ultimately what happens to Yaakov. If there's problems in the family, there's sibling rivalry, The story doesn't end. The older brother's tried to kill the younger brother. It's a complicated, but that's real life. And that's the main issue that he has to deal with. The real dragon is not Lavan, it's Esav that he has to run away from and come back and integrate. Even, I'll just add one more thing because it's so vital. The crisis at the center of the story that with Campbell has to do with marriage is that he thinks he's marrying Rachel, but he's marrying Leah. He wakes up in the morning and it's Leah. And that's a nightmare. And he goes back to his uncle and said, you cheated me. He said, oh no, we don't marry the young before we marry the older, and that's the way it is, and deal with it. And now you want Rachel, you have to work for 7 more years. And but again, there's another element that's added. We have to have the oral Torah also. The oral Torah, there's an ancient tradition that when Rachel and Leah were born, and their cousins were Yaakov and Esav, so all the family said, the older girl should marry the older son, and the younger girl should marry the younger son. The reason Yaakov and Rachel fell in love at first sight in a totally romantic, as if it was written in the 19th century. It's in the Bible. It's totally romantic. That they fall in love at first sight is because they were meant to be with each other. Yaakov and Rachel have been destined to be since they were born. But Leah is destined to be with Esav. Leah is also a tohu soul. The whole destiny of Yaakov is to walk in the footsteps of Esav. He's born following Esav, holding onto his heel. His whole journey from the very beginning is he's trying to catch up with Esav and integrate his chaotic light into his rectified vessels. So he's named after following him and being at his heel. He then has to dress up like him and learn how to have Hakol Kol Yaakov, the voice is the voice of Yaakov. But Hayadayim Yedei Esav, to learn to be a kind of coarse, rugged hero. We are facing the same challenge now. We like to be, the people at Otef Aza, they like to be Hakol Kol Yaakov. They didn't want to have the hands of Esav. We're all gradually learning what Yaakov is learning. That's our story. I call it our story is we need to be a sheep in wolf's clothing. Hamas are a wolf in sheep's clothing. They give you presents, they give you medals, they say goodbye to you, they film you when you're smiling, they're pretending, but it's such a ridiculous costume because they're standing with their Kalashnikovs and their masks, but they're pretending to be sheep. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Look how kind we are. They're so grateful, the hostages, for the time they spent in the camp, in the summer camp called Gaza. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. We're the opposite. We are sheep. We don't like fighting. We don't like wars. But our hero's journey is just like Yaakov. Yaakov had to learn to be like Esav as much as he disliked it. That's his calling. That's his journey. So he has to dress up like Esav and have this combination of you have the voice, the gentle, tender voice of Yaakov, who's a tamim, a dweller of tents, an introvert, and you have to be an extrovert like Esav, and a fighter, and a cunning, and cheat, and then you fight the angel, end up with actual fighting, and then you're known by being a fighter. Yisrael, it's you fight and you conquer this angel. And he also has to marry the woman who is destined to be Esav's wife. It's part of inheriting the whole. She wanted it. That's the whole story is that she was wicked, just like Esav, Leah. Leah was wicked. That's why she was a match made in heaven or in hell or whatever for Esav. But then she said, I don't want any of this. I want to be with Yaakov. I want to take my energy and narrow it and push it. You remember I told you before that I started doing tshuva, coming to the frum world. I felt that I had to narrow myself. And then I was told, you have to bring your energy and expand it from within. That's what Leah is going through. Leah is a ba'alat tshuva, and she's marrying someone who's below her. Because Esav and Leah belong to a higher spiritual level. They have this chaotic energy. It's unintegrated, but it's very high. They have all this creativity, they have all the art and the science and the wisdom, but they don't have the Yiddishkeit that Yaakov has, the vessels, the commitment, the details. But she narrows herself and marries a husband who doesn't love her because she believes that he's going to grow up and integrate those lights. And indeed it's explained that once he became Yisrael integrates Esav into him. So he fell in love with Leah finally. Because Israel is a mate for Leah. Yaakov is the mate of Rachel. And Israel, that's his other name, his higher name, is the mate of Leah. So what for him was the tragedy of his life. That's a good lesson for relationships. You marry a woman, and before the marriage, you marry a partner, a spouse, and you see the Rachel aspect of them, and you fall in love with the Rachel aspect. Then you wake up after the marriage, and you see another face. And that other face, this other person, is, I didn't want to marry them. I saw them before, here and there, but I was cheated. And you're told you're stuck, they're together. It's a package deal, Rachel and Leah, it's a package deal. And you don't realize that everything that is challenging about your spouse, that's the spouse of your future self that you have to grow and become. It's everything he's running away from. He's running away from his brother Esav, and then he comes face to face with the would-be bride who's saying, hello, you remember me? I was supposed to marry your brother, I'm marrying you. The energy you're running away from, I'm gonna make you confront it and deal with it. And she helps him grow and fight the angel and integrate the chaotic lights of Esav. And then finally, he's buried with Leah in Me'arat HaMachpelah. Rachel is dafka on the outside, she's in another place. Leah becomes the mother of most of his children, becomes the person who is next to him, and becomes the person who helped him integrate. She challenged him. She made sure he doesn't run away forever. He maybe wanted, like his grandfather, to go and not come back, to go on this journey and not come back. She told him, you have to come back, and you have to face Esav. And then he integrates it. And all this journey, we wouldn't have discovered it if we would have adopted the Jungian, Campbellian lens of just looking for what we, what's the word? Assuming, how is it called? That you have the goal in front of you before you have it set out for you. You know what you're looking for. So you find what you're looking for, but you don't find what you're not looking for. You find what you're not looking for when you don't come with the preset.
Confirmation bias. Preconceived notion.
Yeah, a preconceived notion, yeah. You come to a preconceived notion, the confirmation bias. You have to look at the details, and you have to go beyond the text into the oral tradition also. And then the oral tradition just makes the inner dimension of the story surface, that you realize that the whole story with Esav is very, very, very fundamental. And of course the angel has to do with Esav. You can't see it any other way, it's so obvious. Well, you can, there's 70 facets to the Torah, so you can add some more things, but it just works so well. And then you get a whole story of individuation that is very different from the hero's journey. It's the main concern is reintegrating into the world and building a family and building a home and advancing at a slow pace and wanting to pass it on to your children, not being your own hero. The hero for you is God and the rest of humanity that you want to bring this light to them, give this light to them. And the real challenges begin after you get married and after you start raising your children. All this was just to set you on the path, and now let's see you deal with teenagers. and that's where the real adventure begins, is when he goes back and it says, now it starts, and it's not your path, Esav, it's not my old path of running away from you. It's I'm gonna get to your energy, to everything you are about, but I'm going to do it at my own slow pace, with my kids, with the family, in a rectified world, in a world that I want to really build and care about it. I'm not going to break the vessels. I'm going to take all your chaotic lights and put them in the rectified vessels.
Hi everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, please press like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. If you want more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.